Ava Monroe hadn't planned on thinking at all this weekend. That was the whole point of the trip. Banana Island shimmered like a secret the city kept for only a few. Quiet roads, manicured palms, glassy water hugging the edges of private estates that looked more like curated dreams than real homes. The waterfront villa Ella had booked sat confidently along the lagoon, all white stone, floor-to-ceiling windows, and understated luxury. No noise, no chaos, no reminders of the life Ava had left behind back home. Just sun, silence, and her best friend. Ava stepped out of the car and inhaled slowly, the humid Lagos air warm against her skin. Somewhere behind her, Ella was laughing, already halfway through a phone call, already in her element. Ava smiled despite herself. Ella had always been like this, effortless, magnetic, the kind of woman who belonged in beautiful places. Ava had come because she needed to breathe. Single motherhood had a way of shrinking your world without asking permission. Days became routines, routines became responsibilities, and somewhere in between, Ava had forgotten what it felt like to be just a woman. Not a mother, not the dependable one, just herself. This weekend, Ella had said, gripping Ava's hands at the airport, "You don't worry about anyone but you. I've got everything covered." Ava hadn't asked what everything meant. She found out the moment they walked into the villa. The space was open and impossibly elegant. Neutral tones, soft lighting, modern art that whispered money instead of shouting it. Ava was admiring the view when she heard a familiar male voice behind her. "You're early." Her body reacted before her mind did. Ava turned slowly. And there he was, Liam Monroe. Time did something strange in that moment, stretching and tightening all at once. The boy she remembered, quiet, awkward, always buried in books, was gone. In his place stood a man who looked carved rather than born. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an effortlessly expensive linen shirt, with the sleeves rolled just enough to suggest control rather than ease. His face was sharper now, more disciplined. His presence filled the room without him trying. And his eyes, dark, observant, unreadable, lifted and locked onto hers. Something in Ava's chest shifted. "Liam," she said, her voice softer than she intended. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly masked by composure. But she saw it, the pause, the recognition. "Ava," he said, "it's been a while." "Too long." Ella squealed and rushed between them, throwing her arms around her twin brother. "You didn't tell me you'd be here already." "I had meetings nearby," Liam replied calmly. "I stopped by to drop something off." Ava barely heard the rest. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, her senses uncomfortably alert. She told herself to relax, to remember that this was Ella's brother. Off limits, entirely, unquestionably off limits. Yet when Liam looked back at her, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, curiosity, awareness. Ava broke eye contact first. The afternoon unfolded in laughter and unpacking, champagne glasses clinking as sunlight spilled across the villa. Ava tried to ground herself in the moment, helping Ella arrange flowers, laughing at old stories, pretending her skin didn't hum every time Liam moved through the room. He didn't linger. He excused himself politely, promising to return later with takeout recommendations and a boat captain's number. "Was that weird for you?" Ella asked casually once he left. Ava shrugged. "Seeing him again?" "A little. He's different." Ella laughed. "Tell me about it. He's been different since money found him." Ava smiled, relieved by the normalcy of the conversation. Surely Ella hadn't noticed anything. The evening arrived gently, Lagos glowing in the distance as lights flickered on across the lagoon. Ava changed into a simple dress, letting the breeze cool her skin as she stood on the balcony alone. She should have gone inside. Instead, she heard footsteps behind her. "I thought you might be out here." She turned. Liam stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed in a way that felt intentional. The city lights reflected faintly in his eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Couldn't stop thinking," he replied. then paused. About how long it's been. Ava nodded. Life happens. He studied her, his gaze slower now, more personal. You look settled. The word landed strangely. Ava thought of school lunches, bedtime routines, quiet strength built out of necessity. I am, she said carefully. Mostly. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just full. The breeze lifted a strand of hair across Ava's face. Liam reached out without thinking, his fingers brushing her cheek as he tucked it back. The touch was brief, electric. They both froze. I shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. Ava swallowed. No, you shouldn't have. Neither of them moved away. The city hummed below, distant traffic blending with the soft lap of water against stone. Ava felt the weight of everything she was risking and everything she had already lost in life. This is a bad idea, she whispered. Yes, Liam agreed. It is. He still didn't step back. Their kiss wasn't rushed. It was hesitant, almost restrained, as if both were waiting for the other to pull away. When neither did, the restraint snapped. Ava's body responded before her logic could catch up. His hands were warm, grounding, his presence overwhelming, in a way that felt dangerous and intoxicating. She pulled back first, breathless. We can't. Liam's forehead rested against hers. I know. Yet when she slipped past him and retreated inside, her hands were shaking. Later that night, Ava lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every second. She knew better. She had responsibilities. A life built on stability, not risk. But something had already changed. Down the hall, a door opened softly. Ava's breath caught as Liam stood in the doorway, eyes dark, expression stripped of control. This doesn't leave this room, he said quietly. If you say no, I walk away. Ava's heart pounded. She thought of rules, of loyalty, of consequences. Then she thought of how alive she felt in that moment. Just tonight, she said. Liam nodded once. Outside, Lagos kept moving, unaware that inside a quiet villa on Banana Island, two lives had just crossed a line they would never be able to erase. And as Ava closed her eyes, one thought echoed louder than all the others. This trip was already costing her more than she'd planned. Morning arrived quietly, the kind that felt almost apologetic. Ava woke to soft light filtering through sheer curtains, the lagoon outside glassy and calm, as though nothing reckless had happened beneath the same roof just hours earlier. For a few seconds she lay still, allowing herself the illusion that the night before had been a dream, something her body had imagined in a moment of weakness. Then she felt it. The echo of his touch, the memory of his breath against her skin, the unmistakable certainty that what had happened was very real. Ava sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around herself. Her chest tightened, not with regret exactly, but with awareness. One night, that was all it had been meant to be. A mistake wrapped in moonlight and poor judgment. A line crossed and immediately erased. She repeated the thought like a mantra as she showered, dressed, and tied her hair into a neat knot. One night, supposed to be enough. By the time she walked into the kitchen, Ella was already there, barefoot, radiant, humming softly as she poured coffee. Good morning, Ella said brightly. You look rested. Ava forced a smile. Didn't sleep much. Ella shrugged. Same. Jet lag or excitement, probably. Ava reached for a mug, her fingers trembling just slightly. She kept her eyes on the counter, afraid that guilt might show on her face like a neon sign. She told herself to breathe, to act normal, to remember that no one knew. No one was supposed to know. Liam didn't appear at breakfast. That should have relieved her. Instead, it unsettled her. The day unfolded with a kind of cruel ease. Brunch at a private terrace overlooking the water. A slow drive through Ikoyi in Ella's sleek SUV. Shopping at boutiques that smelled like money and restraint. Ava laughed when expected to, nodded when appropriate, and reminded herself repeatedly that this was temporary. She could go home. She would go home. But avoidance became its own form of torment. Every time Ava thought she'd escaped the tension, Liam appeared, leaning casually against a doorway, stepping into the room just as she turned around, his presence sending a sharp awareness through her body. They barely spoke, barely looked at each other, and yet everything between them spoke loudly. A brush of fingers when passing a glass, a shared glance held half a second too long, the way Liam's jaw tightened when she laughed at something another man said. It was unbearable. By the third day, Ava felt stretched thin, nerves pulled taut beneath her skin. She cornered Liam late that evening in the hallway, her voice low. "We need to talk." His eyes flicked down the corridor before settling on her. "Not here." "Then where?" she whispered. "Because pretending nothing happened is making me lose my mind." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. 5 minutes, the balcony. She paced while waiting, the city glowing below, her thoughts racing faster than she could control. When Liam stepped out beside her, the space felt instantly smaller. "This was supposed to end," Ava said, crossing her arms. "One night." "I know," he replied calmly. "You said it yourself." "I meant it," he said. "I still do." The words should have settled things. They didn't. "Then why do you keep looking at me like that?" she asked. Liam exhaled slowly, his composure slipping just enough to reveal tension beneath. "Because wanting you doesn't disappear just because it shouldn't exist." Ava's breath caught. "We can't do this," she said. I don't live the kind of life where secrets stay contained." His gaze softened. "I know you're a mother." The way he said it, without judgment, without pity, made something ache in her chest. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she admitted, "but now it has." "So we stop," he said, even as his hand rested against the railing inches from hers. "Before it becomes something else." Ava nodded. Neither moved. The silence stretched until it was heavy, until her resolve thinned under the weight of proximity and unspoken desire. Liam turned to her slowly. "This is the last time we talk about it." The words felt like a dare. The kiss that followed wasn't cautious this time. It was hungry, charged with everything they'd been denying. Ava felt herself unraveling, logic slipping through her fingers as Liam pulled her closer. They didn't rush to the bedroom. They stood there, framed by city lights and the quiet roar of temptation, hands exploring, mouths learning. It wasn't just physical this time. It was personal, intimate, dangerous. Afterward, Ava lay beside him in the low glow of dawn, her head resting against his chest. "This changes things," she murmured. "Yes," he said simply. She traced a slow line along his arm. "You don't do this. You don't get involved." "I don't," he agreed, "which is why this is a problem." Ava lifted her head, meeting his eyes. "Then why are you still here?" Liam hesitated. It was brief, but she noticed. "Because I don't want this to end the way I've ended everything else," he admitted. Something warm and frightening bloomed in her chest. The next days blurred into a pattern that felt both exhilarating and exhausting. Stolen moments, locked doors, late-night conversations that dipped just close enough to vulnerability before retreating. Ava learned the rules of Liam's world: privacy, control, restraint, and how easily they bent around her. She told herself she wasn't falling, but she noticed how he listened when she talked about her child, how his hand lingered longer when she was tired, how his voice softened only with her. Liam, for his part, found himself unraveling in ways he didn't understand. Ava didn't need him to perform or protect. She existed fully, with strength shaped by responsibility, with a softness that didn't ask for permission. It terrified him. "You deserve more than this," he told her one night. Ava smiled sadly. "Then stop giving me less." He didn't answer. What was meant to end quietly had grown teeth. And as Ava lay awake that night, listening to the city breathe, she knew the truth she'd been avoiding. Walking away was no longer simple. It was becoming impossible. What began as hesitation turned into intention. Ava noticed the shift the moment Liam sent her the address. It wasn't the villa this time, or a stolen hour tucked between Ella's plans. It was an apartment, quiet, discreet, perched high above Ikoyi with a view that swallowed the city whole. The message came without explanation, without preamble, as if they'd silently agreed to stop pretending this was accidental. She stared at her phone longer than she should have. Then she went. The building rose clean and imposing from a private street, security tight, anonymity assured. Ava felt her pulse quicken as the elevator climbed, the soft hum filling the space between her thoughts. When Liam opened the door, something in his expression told her this wasn't just another escape. This was a choice. Inside, the apartment was restrained elegance. Neutral walls, low lighting, furniture chosen for comfort rather than display. It felt lived in, but controlled like him. He took her coat without a word, his fingers brushing her wrists just long enough to make her inhale sharply. "We shouldn't be here," she said, even as she stepped fully inside. "I know," he replied, closing the door. "You can leave." She didn't. Their time together became a pattern, deliberate and dangerously easy. Late nights when Ella thought Ava was sleeping. Early mornings when the city still yawned awake. Short drives, longer silences, a rhythm built around secrecy. Ikoyi held them gently, offering privacy in exchange for discretion. But secrecy carried weight. Ava felt it most when she was with Ella, at brunches filled with laughter, during shared memories and easy trust. The guilt sat heavy in her chest, sharp and insistent. Ella spoke freely, joked about her brother's rigidity, teased Ava about needing to relax more. Every word felt like a test Ava was failing. "You've been distant," Ella said one afternoon, studying her over coffee. Ava forced a laugh. "Just tired." Ella reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to carry everything alone." The irony nearly broke her. Liam never asked her to lie. He never demanded anything at all. That somehow made it worse. He existed in stolen moments, careful boundaries, an unspoken understanding that this was all he could offer. "I can't promise you anything," he told her one night as they stood by the window, the city glowing below. "Not more than this." Ava nodded, though her chest ached. "I know." She didn't tell him how much it hurt. In his presence, Liam found himself unraveling in ways he'd spent years preventing. Ava wasn't impressed by his wealth or swayed by his control. She saw through him with a quiet clarity that left him exposed. She asked questions he didn't want to answer. She noticed things he tried to hide. "You're always braced," she said once, her fingers tracing the tension in his shoulder. "Like you're waiting for something to go wrong." His jaw tightened. "Experience teaches you to expect it." "And does it ever get exhausting?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her closer, as if proximity could silence truths he wasn't ready to face. Their connection grew heavier, more consuming. The physical chemistry never faded, but something else took root. Shared silences, unguarded laughter, moments where Ava rested her head against his chest and felt briefly safe. That frightened her. She'd learned long ago what it meant to love someone who couldn't stay. She had built her life around stability, around choosing certainty over longing. And yet here she was, falling into a man who existed in margins and shadows. "You're going to get hurt," she told herself one night, lying awake in the apartment while Liam slept beside her. She already was. Liam, meanwhile, found his rules slipping. He began to think of Ava in future tense, then stopped himself sharply. He imagined introducing her to spaces he'd kept closed, then reminded himself why he didn't do permanence. But the desire to claim her, to remove the secrecy, to erase the risk, pressed against him constantly. "Why do you look at me like that?" Ava asked once, catching his gaze lingering too long. "Like what?" he asked. "Like you're deciding something." He looked away. "Because I am." But he never told her what. Lagos watched them quietly. The city offered glamour and shadow in equal measure. Dimly lit lounges, quiet streets after midnight. the hum of wealth moving unseen. They blended easily into its rhythm, two people hiding in plain sight. Yet Ava felt the tension building, an unspoken countdown ticking beneath every kiss. She feared what loving Liam would cost her. He feared what wanting her might force him to confront. Still, neither walked away. Because in the spaces between guilt and restraint, desire and fear, they had found something rare. And letting go of it felt far more dangerous than holding on. The breaking point didn't arrive loudly. It came quietly, in fragments. Missed calls Ava couldn't return, conversations cut short, moments when Liam's eyes hardened just as she thought she saw something real flicker there. It came in the way she started planning her days around stolen hours instead of certainty, and in the way her chest tightened whenever she imagined a future that didn't include shadows. Ava had always known this would catch up to her. She just hadn't known how heavy it would feel when it did. They were in the Ikoyi apartment when it finally surfaced, the city glowing beyond the windows, the air thick with unspoken things. Liam stood near the counter, sleeves rolled up, focused on pouring wine like it was something he could control. Ava watched him for a long moment before speaking. "I can't keep doing this like it doesn't matter." His hand stilled. "It matters." "That's not what I mean," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I need to know where this is going." Liam didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his expression was carefully neutral, the mask she'd come to recognize. "I've been honest," he said. "I told you I can't offer more than this." "You told me you couldn't promise," Ava replied. "That's not the same as refusing to choose." A silence fell between them, sharp and brittle. "I don't make decisions lightly," he said finally. "I don't have the luxury of waiting," she said. "I have a child, a life built on showing up. I can't exist in the margins forever." Something flickered in his eyes then. Fear, perhaps, or something deeper he didn't have a name for. "Public choices come with consequences," he said quietly. "You don't understand what that means in my world." "Then explain it to me," she said, "because right now, all I hear is that I'm convenient." The words landed harder than she intended. Liam's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "Then prove me wrong," she said. The near exposure came 2 nights later. They were leaving a private lounge on Victoria Island, the kind of place where discretion was expected and remembered. Ava had been laughing at something Liam said, her guard down for once, when a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Ava?" Her blood ran cold. Ella stood a few steps away, eyes bright with surprise, gaze flicking between them. "What are you doing here?" Ella asked. Ava's heart pounded as Liam stepped back instinctively, distance snapping into place between them, like a practiced reflex. "Just business," Liam said smoothly. Ava forced a smile. "We ran into each other." Ella laughed, oblivious. "Of course you did. Small city." But as they parted ways, Ava's hands trembled, the adrenaline lingering long after the moment passed. The realization hit her hard. This wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about how close she was to losing everything. Later that night, she lay awake beside Liam, staring at the ceiling. "That can't happen again," she said softly. "It won't," he replied. But she heard the uncertainty beneath his certainty. The next crack came from Liam himself. It happened unexpectedly, on a quiet evening when Ava mentioned her child's school presentation. Excitement brightening her voice. Liam listened, his expression unreadable. "You'd be good at this," she said gently. "Being present." His body stiffened. "You don't know that," he said. "I see it," she replied. "You care more than you admit." He sat up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "Care has a cost." "So does avoidance," Ava said. He looked at her then, really looked, and something finally gave way. "My father taught me what happens when you let people see you," he said quietly. He built everything on appearances. The moment he showed weakness, it was taken from him. Ava stayed silent, letting him continue. "I learned early that love is leverage," he said, "and I swore I'd never give anyone that kind of power over me." Ava's chest ached. I'm not asking for power. I know, he said. That's what scares me. The honesty unsettled them both. But honesty didn't erase reality. Ava felt the strain everywhere. When Ella spoke freely about family, when she herself had to lie by omission, when guilt settled in her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. She hated what secrecy was turning her into. One afternoon, Ella hugged her tightly, smiling. I don't know what I'd do without you. The words nearly shattered Ava's resolve. That night, she made her decision. I can't keep lying, Ava said, standing in the apartment, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. Not to her, not to myself. Liam watched her, his face unreadable. What are you saying? I'm saying I need more than hidden moments, she replied. And if you can't give that, I need to walk away. The words hurt to say. He took a step toward her, then stopped. The conflict in his eyes was unmistakable. I don't know how to be what you need, he admitted. Ava nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. Then you need to figure out if you want to learn. She turned away before he could answer. Outside, Lagos pulsed on, brilliant, indifferent, full of lives colliding and consequences waiting. Ava knew that whatever came next would cost her something. The only question was whether the price of wanting more was worth paying. The test sat on the bathroom counter like a verdict. Ava stared at it for a long time before she allowed herself to breathe. 2 lines. Clear, unforgiving, impossible to misread. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat and the hum of the apartment around her. Panic rose first, hot and immediate, followed by fear so sharp it made her dizzy. Then, unexpectedly, hope slipped in quietly, threading itself through the chaos like a question she wasn't ready to answer. There was no hiding this. No careful arrangement of schedules, no locked doors, no borrowed time. Her hand pressed instinctively to her stomach as she sank onto the edge of the tub, the weight of reality settling into her bones. She had built her life on certainty, on protecting what mattered most. And now everything was about to change. Liam arrived later that evening, his presence filling the apartment before he even spoke. Ava watched him from the kitchen doorway, noting the familiar restraint in his posture, the controlled calm that had always defined him. She wondered how long it would last. We need to talk, she said. He nodded, sensing the gravity in her tone. Okay. They sat across from each other, the space between them taut with unspoken tension. Ava folded her hands in her lap, grounding herself. I'm pregnant, she said. The words hung in the air, fragile and powerful all at once. Liam didn't react the way she expected. There was no denial, no immediate questions, no visible anger. Instead, he went very still. His gaze fixed on a point just past her shoulder, jaw tightening, breath measured as though he were bracing against something internal. Ava felt her chest tighten, uncertainty clawing its way up her throat. Say something, she whispered. He exhaled slowly. How far along? The question startled her. A few weeks. Silence stretched again, thick and heavy. This changes everything, he said finally. Yes, Ava replied. That's the point. He stood abruptly, pacing the room once before stopping near the window, the city lights reflecting faintly in his eyes. Ava watched him, trying to read the storm beneath his composure. I need to be clear, he said without turning around. I won't disappear. Her breath hitched. But I don't know how to do this, he continued. I don't know how to be what this requires. Ava rose slowly, moving closer. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for honesty. He turned to face her then, conflict etched into every line of his face. You're asking me to dismantle a life I built on control. I'm asking you to show up, she said softly, for a child who didn't ask for any of this. The word child seemed to land harder than anything else. Liam ran a hand through his hair, his composure finally cracking. I spent my life making sure nothing could trap me, Nothing could force my hand. And now? Ava asked. And now, he said quietly, I'm terrified that if I do this wrong, I'll become exactly what I swore I wouldn't be. Ava felt tears sting her eyes. I don't need you to have all the answers. I just need you not to run. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the tension radiating outward. I'm not running, he said. I'm staying, even if I don't know how yet. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something. And right now, it was enough. The fallout Ava feared loomed just beyond the walls of the apartment. Ella. The thought sat heavy in her chest, guilt pressing down until it was almost unbearable. Ava had replayed the moment of truth 1,000 times in her mind. Ella's face, her voice, the fracture of trust that would follow. There was no version of this that didn't hurt. She chose a quiet afternoon. The villa bathed in soft light. The city unusually calm. Ella sat across from her, flipping through photos on her phone, unaware that the ground beneath them was about to shift. There's something I need to tell you, Ava said. Ella looked up immediately, concern flashing across her features. What's wrong? Ava's hands trembled as she clasped them together. I've been lying to you. The words fell between them, final and heavy. Ella frowned. About what? Ava closed her eyes briefly. About Liam. The silence that followed was deafening. Ella's expression shifted slowly, confusion first, then realization, then something that looked dangerously close to hurt. How? Ella asked. When? Ava's voice shook. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did, and now I'm pregnant. Ella stared at her, the color draining from her face. You're joking, she whispered. I'm not. The betrayal landed like a physical blow. You knew he was off limits, Ella said, her voice rising. You knew what he meant to me, to my family. I know, Ava said, tears spilling over now, and I hate myself for hurting you. But I couldn't keep lying. Ella stood abruptly, pacing the room, anger and disbelief warring across her face. All this time, every smile, every conversation. You stood there and... I never meant to hurt you, Ava said, her voice breaking. You're my family too. Ella stopped, turning to face her. Family doesn't do this. The words cut deep. I don't expect forgiveness, Ava said. I just needed you to know the truth. Ella laughed bitterly. Congratulations, you've succeeded. She walked away, leaving Ava alone with the wreckage. That night, Ava sat by the window, the city lights blurring through tears. Liam joined her quietly, his presence steady even as the weight of consequences settled around them. She knows, Ava said. He nodded. I assumed she would. I don't know what happens next, Ava admitted. Liam looked at her, something resolute forming beneath his conflict. What happens next is that I stop pretending this is something I can manage from the shadows. Her heart pounded. What does that mean? It means I take responsibility, he said, not just privately. Fully. The words sent a shiver through her. Love, fear, and responsibility collided in that moment, reshaping everything they thought they knew. Ava rested her hand over her stomach again, grounding herself in the reality of what was coming. There were no more secrets, only choices, and the consequences that would follow them into a future neither of them could control, but would have to face together. Time did not fix everything, but it clarified what mattered. The months that followed were quieter than Ava expected, marked less by dramatic confrontations and more by slow reckonings. Lagos kept its rhythm, traffic swelling and thinning, lights winking on across the lagoon each evening. But inside her world, things moved with careful intention. There were conversations that had to happen, spaces that needed to be redefined, and a future that demanded honesty rather than escape. Ava learned that healing was rarely loud. It was the discipline of choosing herself in small moments, the courage to stop apologizing for wanting stability, the resolve to stop shrinking her needs to fit someone else's comfort. She moved out of the Ikoi apartment and into a quieter place closer to the water, a home that felt grounded rather than borrowed. Mornings became slower. She drank tea on the balcony, hand resting over her growing belly, listening to the city wake. Each day she felt more present in her body, more anchored in her life. Motherhood had taught her resilience. This chapter taught her clarity. Liam, meanwhile, found himself standing at the edge of a life he had constructed meticulously and questioning whether it had ever truly belonged to him. The control that once protected him now felt like a cage. He had spent years mastering distance, believing that detachment was the only safe way to exist. Fatherhood dismantled that belief with brutal efficiency. He attended appointments without missing a single one. He listened more than he spoke. He learned the language of uncertainty. How to admit fear without retreating. How to show up even when he didn't feel ready. The first time he heard the heartbeat, something irreversible shifted. It wasn't romance, it wasn't panic. It was responsibility, clean and undeniable. And with it came a choice. Ella took longer. There were weeks of silence followed by short messages that felt transactional rather than warm. Ava respected the space, even when it hurt. She didn't chase forgiveness or try to soften the truth. She let accountability speak for itself. When they finally met again, it was on neutral ground. A cafe overlooking the water, quiet and unassuming. Ella looked different. Not broken, just changed. "You should have told me sooner," Ella said, her voice steady but tired. "I know," Ava replied, "and I'll carry that regret with me." Ella studied her for a long moment. "I don't trust easily anymore." Ava nodded. "Neither do I." It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Liam's decision came without fanfare. He canceled a long-standing overseas expansion, delegated control he would once have guarded fiercely, and made his life visible in ways he never had before. Not for optics, not for appearances, for alignment. "I'm not choosing between you and my life," he told Ava one evening as they watched the city lights stretch across the water. "I'm choosing to build one that doesn't require hiding." Ava looked at him then, really looked, and saw a man who had stopped running from vulnerability. Not perfect, not fearless, but present. "I won't accept half love," she said quietly. "Not anymore." He nodded. "You shouldn't." Their relationship didn't become effortless overnight. There were boundaries to renegotiate, habits to unlearn, trust to rebuild. But it was real, and real, Ava discovered, felt steadier than passion ever had. Lagos bore witness to their transformation. The quiet luxury of their shared spaces reflected the shift. No longer secret, no longer borrowed. They hosted dinners instead of sneaking out, walked openly along the waterfront, allowed their lives to be seen. The day Ava went into labor, rain softened the city, washing the streets clean. Liam arrived before the call ended, his calm masking the depth of his fear. When their child finally cried out into the world, Ava felt something inside her settle. This wasn't chaos. This was arrival. Liam held their child with reverence, eyes bright with emotion he no longer tried to suppress. Ava watched him, a quiet certainty blooming in her chest. This was what accountability looked like. Not perfection, but presence. Ella visited weeks later. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, eyes softening as she took in the scene. Ava didn't speak. She didn't need to. Ella stepped forward and held the baby gently. "They're beautiful," she said. Ava swallowed. "Thank you." Trust didn't return all at once, but it returned honestly. And that mattered more. Years from now, Ava would look back on this season not as the moment everything fell apart, but as the moment everything aligned. The storm had stripped away illusion, comfort, and fear. What remained was truth. Liam had chosen the family he never planned but fiercely wanted. Ava had chosen herself, fully, unapologetically. Together they chose a future shaped not by secrecy, but by intention. And as Lagos stretched endlessly around them, brilliant, layered, alive, their story found its quiet ending. Not in perfection, but in truth.